In the dense forests of occupied Holland, a group of scattered paratroopers was about to face annihilation. A routine airborne operation turned deadly when SS Panzer divisions, undetected by Allied intelligence, unleashed a devastating counterattack. Lieutenant Colonel James Richardson wasn't your typical airborne officer. For 8 years, he was British SAS, known for leading the most successful extraction operations in North Africa. When SS-Sturmbannführer Klaus Reinhardt's forces moved to encircle the paratroopers, they had no idea they were facing a master of unconventional warfare. Richardson's decision to use the river as an escape route would trigger a dramatic shift in Operation Market Garden's southern front. What began as a desperate bid for survival would become a legendary tale of military ingenuity. The Dutch waterways would never be the same after the night 200 Allied paratroopers turned a river into their salvation, leaving Reinhardt's forces hunting shadows in their wake. Before we jump back in, tell us where you're tuning in from, and if this story touches you, make sure you're subscribed, because tomorrow I've saved something extra special for you. In the pre-dawn hours of September 17, 1944, the largest airborne operation in military history began to unfold across the skies of occupied Holland. As thousands of paratroopers prepared to jump into what would become one of World War II's most ambitious and ultimately ill-fated operations, none could have predicted the chaos that awaited them below. What started as a meticulously planned operation would soon descend into a nightmare that would test the limits of human endurance and military preparedness. How did this massive airborne assault, designed to secure a swift victory, instead become a cautionary tale of military planning? The initial drop zone selected for Operation Market Garden seemed deceptively peaceful from 1,500 feet above. The flat Dutch landscape, with its patchwork of fields and canals, appeared to offer ideal conditions for an airborne landing. However, the German forces had anticipated such a move and strategically positioned anti-aircraft batteries in concealed positions around these otherwise inviting landing zones. As the first wave of C-47 transport aircraft approached their targets, the sky erupted with flak, creating a deadly obstacle course for both pilots and paratroopers. The 101st Airborne Division, tasked with securing the southernmost objectives, encountered immediate resistance. Their drop zones near Eindhoven became killing fields as German gunners opened fire on descending paratroopers who, suspended helplessly beneath their canopies, could neither evade nor return fire effectively. The white parachutes that dotted the sky provided perfect targets against the blue September backdrop, leading to casualties before many soldiers even reached the ground. Navigation errors and scattered drops complicated the situation further. Strong winds and pilot evasive maneuvers to avoid anti-aircraft fire resulted in many paratroopers landing miles from their intended drop zones. Units became fragmented, with some platoons landing in the midst of German positions, while others found themselves isolated in flooded fields or dense woods. The carefully planned unit cohesion dissolved within minutes of the operation's commencement. Communication breakdown added another layer of complexity to the already chaotic situation. Radio equipment damage during the drop left many units unable to coordinate with their command structure or neighboring forces. This communication vacuum forced small groups of paratroopers to operate independently, making tactical decisions without knowledge of the broader strategic situation or the location of friendly forces. The 82nd Airborne Division, dropping near Nijmegen, faced particularly fierce resistance. Their drop zones were surrounded by German units that had been reinforced just days before the operation. As paratroopers descended, they encountered veteran Wehrmacht soldiers who had established well-prepared defensive positions. The element of surprise, crucial for airborne operations, had been compromised, leading to intense firefights before units could even assemble on the ground. Equipment losses during the drop severely impacted the paratroopers' combat effectiveness. Essential heavy weapons, medical supplies, and ammunition containers often landed far from the troops who needed them. Some containers broke upon impact, scattering their contents across the Dutch countryside. Others landed in German-held territory, providing the enemy with valuable intelligence about Allied capabilities and intentions. The British 1st Airborne Division, targeting the crucial Arnhem Bridge, experienced perhaps the most devastating initial landing phase. Their drop zones, selected based on outdated intelligence, placed them directly in the path of two SS Panzer divisions that intelligence had failed to identify. The resulting encounter transformed what was supposed to be a rapid advance to secure the bridge into a desperate struggle for survival from the moment boots touched ground. Weather conditions, which had initially appeared favorable, deteriorated rapidly during subsequent drops. Low clouds and fog delayed follow-up drops of supplies and reinforcements, leaving the already beleaguered paratroopers to fight with dwindling resources. The question of how long they could hold their positions without resupply became increasingly urgent as ammunition stocks ran low and casualties mounted. The Dutch resistance, which had been expected to provide crucial support and intelligence, found itself largely unable to assist the scattered paratroopers effectively. The dispersed nature of the drops meant that many resistance members couldn't locate Allied units to provide them with vital information about German positions and movements. This lack of local intelligence further complicated the paratroopers' efforts to regroup and achieve their objectives. As darkness fell on that first day, the true scope of the disaster began to emerge. What percentage of the original drop force remained combat effective? How would the scattered units consolidate their positions? The answers to these questions would determine not only the fate of Operation Market Garden, but also impact the larger Allied strategy for ending the war in Europe. The paratroopers who survived that initial drop would face an even greater challenge, trying to accomplish their mission while cut off from support and surrounded by an enemy who had been ready and waiting for their arrival. The harsh reality of combat descended upon the scattered paratroopers as dawn broke over the Vietnamese jungle. What had started as a routine drop operation had devolved into a desperate fight for survival, with isolated groups of soldiers finding themselves separated from their main unit and surrounded by an enemy that knew the terrain intimately. The first casualties occurred within hours of the landing. Private James Hernandez, attempting to regroup with his squad, encountered a Vietnamese patrol while crossing a small clearing. The ensuing firefight drew unwanted attention, leading to a chain reaction of encounters that exposed the vulnerable positions of other separated paratroopers. How could they maintain tactical advantage when their positions were compromised before they could even establish a defensive perimeter? Lieutenant Colonel Richardson, commanding the largest gathered group of 37 men, received sporadic radio communications from the scattered units. Each transmission painted an increasingly dire picture. The enemy was moving methodically, using their superior knowledge of the landscape to isolate and engage the American forces. The Vietnamese forces had effectively turned the paratroopers, dispersed landing against them, transforming what should have been a tactical advantage into a critical vulnerability. The mounting pressure forced several small groups to abandon their equipment in favor of mobility. Sergeant Peterson's squad of 7 men was forced to leave behind their radio and heavy weapons when they encountered a significantly larger enemy force. Their survival depended entirely on their ability to move quickly and quietly through the dense undergrowth, but at what cost to their combat effectiveness? The decision to use the river as an escape route emerged from necessity rather than strategic planning. Captain Roberts, leading a group of 15 men pinned down near a tributary of the Songbi River, recognized that the traditional extraction points were likely compromised. The river offered both concealment and a natural navigation route, though it presented its own set of challenges. Would the risk of exposure in the water outweigh the danger of movement through the jungle? Communications between units became increasingly difficult as radio batteries died, and antenna systems, damaged during the drop, failed completely. The lack of coordination led to several friendly fire incidents, including a tense moment when 2 American groups nearly engaged each other in the pre-dawn darkness. The fog of war had never been thicker. How could they distinguish friend from foe in the chaos? The decision to use the river gained momentum as more units reported their positions and situations. The waterway offered a chance to regroup and establish a coherent defensive position, but it also meant abandoning the mission's original objectives. Lieutenant Colonel Richardson weighed the options carefully, knowing that each passing hour increased the risk to his scattered forces. The enemy had already demonstrated their ability to locate and engage isolated units effectively. Medical supplies became a critical concern as the number of wounded increased. Corporal Martinez, the only medic in a group of 9 soldiers, found himself rationing supplies between 3 injured men. The humidity and unsanitary conditions raised the specter of infection, adding urgency to their need for extraction. How long could they maintain combat effectiveness with limited medical resources? The river strategy required careful coordination, despite the communications challenges. Units closer to the water began marking potential gathering points, while those further inland had to navigate through increasingly hostile territory. The enemy, aware of the Americans' movement patterns, began setting up ambush positions along likely routes to the river. Would the paratroopers be able to identify and avoid these deadly traps? The cost of reaching the river proved high. Several small units reported encounters with superior enemy forces, resulting in casualties and captured personnel. The Vietnamese forces demonstrated remarkable efficiency in tracking and engaging the scattered American troops, using their superior numbers to full advantage. Each engagement forced the paratroopers to adapt their tactics, but the pressure remained relentless. The situation demanded decisive action. Lieutenant Colonel Richardson issued orders through the remaining functional radio channels. All units were to make their way to the river using whatever means necessary. The order acknowledged the mission's failure, but prioritized the preservation of his forces. How would this decision impact not only the immediate survival of his men, but also the broader strategic situation in the region? The movement toward the river marked a crucial turning point in the operation. What had begun as a strategic insertion had transformed into a desperate fight for survival, with the Songbi River representing both hope and vulnerability. The paratroopers' training and discipline would be tested to their limits as they attempted to execute this dangerous maneuver under constant enemy pressure. The introduction of SS-Sturmbannführer Klaus Reinhardt to the pursuit of the escaped prisoners marked a significant shift in the German response to the breakout. Unlike the initial chaotic reaction of the camp guards and local police forces, Reinhardt brought a calculated precision to the manhunt that would fundamentally alter its nature. As an experienced tracker and former hunting guide in the Bavarian Alps, Reinhardt approached the pursuit with the same methodical patience he once applied to tracking wild game. Upon receiving the assignment, Reinhardt's first action deviated markedly from the standard Wehrmacht protocol. Instead of immediately deploying additional search parties, he ordered a temporary halt to all pursuit operations. This unexpected decision raised eyebrows among his subordinates, but it reflected his deep understanding of pursuit dynamics. By allowing the initial panic and disorder to settle, Reinhardt could better analyze the patterns and evidence left behind by the escapees. Reinhardt's methodology centered on what he termed pressure points, areas where the fugitives would be forced to make crucial decisions. The river, which many escapees had chosen as their escape route, represented one such point. Rather than spreading his resources thin by attempting to cover the entire waterway, Reinhardt identified key locations where the terrain would naturally funnel the survivors toward specific crossing points or force them to leave the water. SS officers' approach incorporated sophisticated intelligence-gathering techniques that went beyond simple tracking. He established a network of civilian informants in the surrounding villages, understanding that escaped prisoners would eventually need to seek food and supplies. This network extended beyond the immediate vicinity of the camp, reaching into neighboring districts where sympathetic locals might be inclined to assist the fugitives. What made Reinhardt particularly effective was his ability to think like his quarry. He studied the backgrounds of the escaped prisoners, paying special attention to their pre-war occupations and skills. This information allowed him to anticipate their likely decisions and movements. For instance, he noted that several escapees had experience in forestry or agriculture, suggesting they might gravitate toward familiar terrain and avoid urban areas. The psychological aspect of Reinhardt's pursuit strategy proved equally important. He understood that fear could be weaponized not through direct terror, but through the constant pressure of pursuit. By maintaining a steady, relentless presence, he sought to wear down the mental resilience of the fugitives. This approach contrasted sharply with the aggressive but often ineffective sweeps conducted by regular military units. Reinhardt's command structure reflected his hunting philosophy. He organized his forces into small, mobile units that could operate independently while maintaining communication through a central coordination point. These units were equipped with detailed maps of the region and specialized tracking equipment, including trained dogs selected specifically for their stamina rather than aggression. The integration of local knowledge proved crucial to Reinhardt's strategy. He recruited forestry officials and experienced hunters from the region, valuing their intimate understanding of the terrain over military experience. These civilians provided insights into seasonal game trails, weather patterns, and hidden shelters that might not appear on military maps. Technology played a subordinate but significant role in Reinhardt's approach. He utilized the limited radio communication equipment available to coordinate his search teams, but more importantly, he developed a system of visual signals that allowed his units to communicate silently across distances. This method proved particularly effective in the densely forested areas where many escapees sought refuge. The impact of Reinhardt's methodical approach became evident within days of his taking command. The rate of recapture increased significantly, but more importantly, the pattern of captures revealed the effectiveness of his pressure point strategy. Escapees began to be apprehended at precisely the locations he had identified as likely convergence points. What set Reinhardt's pursuit apart from conventional manhunts was his emphasis on patience over immediate results. He understood that time worked in favor of the pursuers, as each passing day depleted the resources and energy of the fugitives. This strategic patience, combined with his systematic approach, created an ever-tightening net around the escape zone. The question that emerged among both pursuers and pursued was whether any amount of preparation or skill could ultimately overcome such a methodically executed hunt. As Reinhardt's influence over the pursuit grew, the nature of the escape transformed from a desperate dash for freedom into a complex game of survival against an opponent who seemed to anticipate every move. The decision to navigate the river presented both salvation and peril for the surviving members of Echo Squad. As dawn broke over the dense forest canopy, the team faced the daunting task of traversing the rapid waters that carved through the wilderness. The river, swollen from recent rainfall, offered a faster route to their extraction point but harbored its own set of challenges that would test their already diminished resources and resolve. Lieutenant Sarah Chen took point in organizing their makeshift flotation devices, utilizing their remaining gear and salvaged materials from their surroundings. The squad's training in water survival proved crucial as they methodically secured their weapons and essential equipment in waterproof containers. But would their preparation be enough against the unpredictable forces of nature? The river's current varied dramatically, alternating between deceptively calm stretches and turbulent rapids that threatened to separate the team. Communication became increasingly difficult over the rush of water, forcing the squad to rely on hand signals and pre-established protocols. Private Rodriguez, despite his injured leg, maintained a vigilant watch over their six, knowing that their water-bound state made them particularly vulnerable to attacks from the riverbank. Technical Sergeant Wilson's expertise in navigation became invaluable as he identified potential hazards in the water's flow patterns. The team learned to read the river's surface, recognizing the subtle signs of submerged obstacles that could spell disaster. Each bend in the river's course presented new challenges, from low-hanging branches to partially submerged logs that could entangle or injure an unwary soldier. The physical toll of fighting the current while maintaining formation tested the squad's endurance. The cold water sapped their strength, and the constant need to adjust their course demanded unrelenting attention. How long could they maintain this level of vigilance before exhaustion began to compromise their judgment? Their progress downstream revealed changes in the surrounding terrain that could affect their mission. The riverbanks alternated between steep cliffs and exposed shorelines, each presenting distinct tactical considerations. The team remained acutely aware that their position in the water made them visible targets against potential threats on higher ground. The squad's equipment, though carefully waterproofed, faced continuous exposure to moisture. Their communications gear required frequent checks to ensure functionality, while their ammunition needed constant protection from water damage. The balance between maintaining their gear and managing their downstream progress created additional complexity in their journey. As hours passed, the psychological impact of their aquatic journey became apparent. The constant sound of rushing water and the physical strain of staying afloat affected each team member differently. Some found the monotonous flow almost hypnotic, requiring regular verbal checks to maintain alertness. What unseen threats might take advantage of their divided attention? The river itself became an unpredictable ally, its course sometimes providing cover from potential observers, but also limiting their options for escape or evasion. The squad developed a rotation system, allowing members brief periods of rest while others maintained the group's trajectory and security. This delicate balance of rest and vigilance became crucial as fatigue began to set in. Their progress brought them into territories with different ecological characteristics, affecting visibility and tactical options. Areas where the river widened offered better maneuverability but less cover, while narrower sections with overhanging vegetation provided concealment but increased the risk of entanglement or ambush. The team's medical concerns evolved with their aquatic environment. The cold water posed risks of hypothermia, while extended exposure threatened to compromise healing wounds and existing injuries. Corporal Chang monitored the squad's physical condition, paying particular attention to signs of environmental stress that could compromise their combat effectiveness. The river's path also influenced their timeline for reaching the extraction point. Stronger currents accelerated their progress but increased risks, while slower sections provided more control but extended their exposure. How would these variations affect their rendezvous calculations, and what adjustments might become necessary to their extraction plan? The squad's experience with riverine operations proved essential, but the unique circumstances of their mission presented challenges beyond standard training scenarios. Each team member contributed specialized knowledge, from understanding water dynamics to identifying potential shelter points along the banks, creating a collective expertise that enhanced their survival chances. As they continued their journey, the river became more than just a means of transportation. It transformed into a dynamic element of their tactical environment, demanding constant adaptation and reassessment. The success of their mission now depended not only on their military skills, but also on their ability to work in harmony with the powerful natural force that carried them toward their objective. The tranquil flow of the river belied the growing tensions within Delta Squad as they navigated the treacherous waters. What had begun as minor disagreements evolved into deep-seated mistrust, threatening to unravel the very fabric of their unit's cohesion. Lieutenant Sarah Chen observed the subtle shifts in dynamics among her team members, particularly between specialists Rodriguez and Thompson, whose once solid partnership showed signs of strain. The source of discord stemmed from Thompson's increasingly erratic behavior following their last supply inventory. Several critical medical supplies had gone missing, and while no direct accusations were made, his defensive responses to routine questions raised red flags among the squad members. How could essential resources disappear without explanation in such a confined space? Private Wilson's discovery of altered navigation logs further complicated matters. The digital records showed unauthorized changes to their planned route, suggesting someone within the squad was attempting to redirect their course. The revelation forced Lieutenant Chen to implement stricter security protocols, requiring dual authentication for any navigational adjustments. The added measures, while necessary, created additional friction within the team. Sergeant Marcus Hayes, typically the squad's voice of reason, found himself caught between loyalty to his longtime colleague Thompson and his duty to report suspicious activities. The weight of this ethical dilemma manifested in his increasingly withdrawn demeanor during mission briefings. His silence spoke volumes, particularly when Thompson proposed alternative routes that deviated significantly from their original mission parameters. The strain became evident in their tactical effectiveness. Training exercises that once demonstrated seamless coordination now revealed dangerous gaps in communication. During a routine security sweep, Rodriguez and Thompson's failure to maintain proper coverage nearly resulted in a breach of their perimeter. What would such a breakdown mean? In an actual combat situation, technical specialist Zhang's analysis of their communication logs revealed patterns of encrypted transmissions originating from within their secure network. The discovery suggested someone was attempting to establish outside contact, violating multiple protocols and potentially compromising their mission security. Who would risk exposing their position, and to what end? The mounting evidence of sabotage forced Lieutenant Chen to confront an uncomfortable reality. One of her trusted team members was actively working against them. The challenge lay in identifying the perpetrator while maintaining enough unit cohesion to complete their mission. Each decision she made could either expose the traitor or drive them further into hiding. As supplies continued to dwindle mysteriously, the squad's physical resources matched their deteriorating trust. Simple tasks became exercises in suspicion, with team members double-checking each other's work and maintaining constant vigilance. The psychological toll of this heightened state of alertness began to show in decreased performance metrics and increased stress indicators. Private Wilson's expertise in behavioral analysis proved invaluable as she documented subtle changes in team dynamics. Her reports indicated a significant shift in Thompson's sleep patterns and his unusual interest in secure communication protocols outside his specialty area. Yet without concrete evidence, any action taken against him risked further destabilizing the squad. The situation reached a critical point during a night navigation exercise. The squad's backup power systems failed, simultaneously with their primary communications array, leaving them vulnerable in unfamiliar territory. The timing and nature of the failures suggested intimate knowledge of their equipment and protocols. Who could have orchestrated such a precisely coordinated disruption? Lieutenant Chen implemented a series of countermeasures, strategically sharing misinformation among team members to trace the source of leaks. The approach yielded unexpected results when conflicting data appeared in intercepted transmissions, indicating multiple security breaches rather than a single point of compromise. The revelation raised an even more disturbing question. Were they dealing with multiple infiltrators? The pressure of constant vigilance began affecting operational efficiency. Team members hesitated to share critical information, fearing it would be used against them. The breakdown in communication threatened to compromise not only their current mission, but the entire operation they had trained months to execute. How could they complete their objectives while maintaining the necessary security protocols? As evidence mounted and tensions escalated, the squad faced a fundamental question. Could they overcome their internal divisions before external threats exploited their vulnerability? The answer would determine not only the success of their mission, but potentially their survival as a unit. The river's current carried them forward, but the undercurrent of suspicion threatened to pull them under. Lieutenant Chen knew that resolving these internal conflicts was paramount to their mission's success, yet identifying the source of betrayal while maintaining operational capability presented a complex challenge that would test her leadership abilities to their limits. The descent of darkness across the turbulent waters marked a critical phase in the squad's journey, as the earlier internal tensions began to manifest in increasingly dangerous ways. The navigation equipment, already struggling with interference, provided only intermittent guidance through the maze of submerged obstacles and shifting currents. How could a team, fractured by recent revelations and mistrust, maintain their cohesion when every decision carried potentially fatal consequences? The water temperature dropped steadily as night approached, creating additional challenges for the vessel's aging systems. The engineering team reported concerning fluctuations in the power distribution, forcing them to redirect energy from non-essential systems to maintain critical functions. This technical constraint limited their ability to use advanced scanning equipment, leaving them more vulnerable to the threats lurking in the depths. Communication between team members became increasingly strained, with conversations reduced to terse, operational exchanges. The weight of unspoken accusations hung heavy in the recycled air of the vessel's confined spaces. Lieutenant Chen's earlier revelation about the compromised mission parameters had created invisible barriers between crew members who had once operated as a seamless unit. Who could be trusted when the mission's true nature remained shrouded in uncertainty? The vessel's sonar picked up irregular patterns in the surrounding waters, suggesting the presence of other vessels or large marine structures. Without full power to their detection systems, the crew couldn't determine if these signatures represented natural formations, others submersibles, or something more sinister. The tactical officers' reports grew more frequent and urgent, highlighting the increasing complexity of their situation. Water pressure readings began showing concerning variations, indicating they were moving through zones of unusual underwater topography. The navigation team identified what appeared to be a network of underwater caverns and channels, presenting both potential shelter and dangerous confined spaces. The decision to explore these formations sparked heated debate among the senior crew members, as each option carried significant risks. The engineering systems continued to show signs of strain, with the chief engineer reporting microscopic stress, fractures in several auxiliary hull sections. These damages, while not immediately critical, added another layer of complexity to their already precarious situation. The repair crews worked in shifts, applying temporary fixes while knowing that each patch reduced their remaining supply of repair materials. Psychological pressure mounted as the hours of darkness stretched on. The medical officer observed increasing signs of stress among crew members, manifesting in subtle but concerning ways. Sleep patterns became disturbed, appetite decreased, and minor conflicts erupted over trivial matters. How long could they maintain operational effectiveness under these conditions? The vessel's external sensors detected subtle changes in water composition, suggesting they had entered a zone with different chemical properties. This environmental shift raised concerns about potential effects on their life support systems and hull integrity. The science team worked to analyze these changes, but their conclusions remained inconclusive due to limited data processing capability. Radio communications became increasingly unreliable, with messages from command arriving garbled or incomplete. This deterioration in their connection to the outside world heightened the sense of isolation and vulnerability. The communication officers' attempts to establish alternative channels met with limited success, leaving them increasingly dependent on their own resources and judgment. The tactical situation grew more complex as they detected intermittent energy signatures that didn't match known patterns. These anomalies raised questions about potential surveillance or pursuit, but the reduced sensor capability left them unable to confirm their suspicions. How could they determine friend from foe in these conditions? The vessel's navigation through the darkness required increasing reliance on passive sonar and dead reckoning, skills that tested the crew's training and experience. The reduced visibility and compromised systems forced them to operate more by instinct and experience than technology, challenging their modern training paradigms. The environmental control systems showed signs of struggle as they moved through waters with varying temperature gradients. These fluctuations affected both equipment performance and crew comfort, adding physical stress to their already challenging situation. The life support officer implemented conservation measures, but these restrictions further impacted crew morale as they continued their journey through the oppressive darkness. The question of their mission's true purpose remained unresolved. The earlier revelations had planted seeds of doubt that grew stronger in the darkness, affecting every decision and interaction. What other secrets lay hidden in the depths of their orders, and how would these revelations impact their ability to complete their mission? The combination of technical challenges, environmental hazards, and psychological pressure created a situation where every decision carried increased weight and consequence. The darkness seemed to amplify their isolation and vulnerability, testing the limits of their training and resilience. Could they maintain their effectiveness as a unit while navigating both the physical dangers around them and the emotional currents within their team? The transition from dusk to complete darkness brought new challenges for the Allied vessels navigating the English Channel. What had begun as a tense but manageable crossing was about to escalate into something far more dangerous. The first indication of German presence came through intercepted radio signals, faint but unmistakable, suggesting coordinated movement of enemy vessels in their vicinity. The Allied fleet maintained strict radio silence, communicating only through predetermined light signals when absolutely necessary. The darkness that had initially provided cover now served a dual purpose, concealing both friend and foe alike. The question lingering in every commander's mind was not if they would encounter German forces, but when and where the confrontation would occur. At Euro 200 hours, radar operators detected multiple contacts approaching from the northeast. The German naval presence consisted primarily of E-boats, fast attack craft designed specifically for coastal warfare. These vessels, officially designated Schnellboot by the German Navy, possessed superior speed and maneuverability compared to their Allied counterparts. Their presence represented the first significant threat to the operation's success. The initial engagement occurred approximately 20 nautical miles off the French coast. German E-boats, operating in wolf-pack formations, attempted to split the Allied convoy into smaller, more vulnerable groups. The tactical advantage seemed to favor the Germans, whose crews were well-versed in nighttime operations and familiar with the local waters. How would the Allied forces respond to this immediate threat while maintaining their crucial element of surprise? Allied destroyer escorts moved to intercept, positioning themselves between the convoy and the approaching E-boats. The water erupted with the sound of naval gunfire as 20mm and 40mm anti-boat weapons opened up, their tracer rounds cutting bright arcs through the darkness. The German vessels, though fewer in number, demonstrated remarkable coordination, weaving between the larger Allied ships and attempting to launch torpedo attacks against the troop transports. The battle intensified as more German vessels joined the engagement. The Allied command faced a critical decision: maintain course and risk higher casualties, or attempt evasive maneuvers that would delay the landing schedule. Time itself became a weapon, with each minute of engagement increasing the risk of broader German awareness of the invasion force's presence. Naval combat in confined waters presented unique challenges. The risk of friendly fire remained high, with vessel identification complicated by darkness and the chaos of battle. Allied ships had to coordinate their movements precisely, maintaining formation while engaging the enemy and protecting the vulnerable transport vessels. The German E-boats' superior speed allowed them to strike quickly and withdraw, forcing the Allied escorts to remain vigilant across multiple sectors simultaneously. Casualties mounted on both sides as the engagement continued. Several Allied support vessels sustained damage from torpedo attacks, while concentrated fire from destroyer escorts succeeded in disabling multiple E-boats. The water became increasingly hazardous, with floating debris and burning fuel creating additional navigation hazards. Would the Allied fleet maintain its cohesion under such pressure? The battle's turning point came when Allied air support arrived, with RAF Coastal Command aircraft responding to carefully coded signal flares. The aircraft's presence forced the German E-boats to break off their attack patterns, as strafing runs from above made their high-speed tactical maneuvers increasingly dangerous. The combination of air and naval power demonstrated the crucial importance of combined arms operations in modern warfare. As the engagement drew to a close, the Allied command assessed the situation. Despite losses, the majority of the invasion force remained intact and on course. The German response, while aggressive, had been localized and contained. However, questions remained about whether the enemy had successfully reported the presence of such a large Allied fleet to their high command. The aftermath of the battle brought new challenges. Damaged vessels required assistance while maintaining the convoy's progress. The Allied command implemented contingency plans, redistributing troops and equipment from damaged transport ships to intact ones. Every adjustment carried the risk of disrupting the carefully planned landing sequences that would soon be crucial to the invasion's success. Telling and preparing this story took us a lot of time, so if you are enjoying it, subscribe to our channel. It means a lot to us. Now back to the story. This first major engagement served as a crucial test of Allied preparation and coordination. The ability to repel a significant German naval threat while maintaining operational security demonstrated the effectiveness of the invasion force's defensive planning. Yet it also highlighted the vulnerabilities of such a massive seaborne operation. How many more such encounters would they face before reaching the French coast? And could they continue to prevent the Germans from comprehending the true scale of the approaching invasion? The night pressed on, with every passing hour bringing the Allied forces closer to their objective. The encounter had proven that despite extensive planning and preparation, the success of Operation Overlord would ultimately depend on the ability of Allied forces to adapt and overcome unexpected challenges. The waters ahead remained hostile, but the first major test had been met and passed. The mounting tensions aboard USS Swordfish had been building since the encounter with German forces, but few could have predicted the depth of discord that would emerge within the crew. At the heart of this growing divide stood Hank Morrison, whose initial reservations about certain command decisions had evolved into something far more problematic. What began as constructive criticism during mission debriefings transformed into open challenges to authority. Hank's technical expertise as the submarine's leading sonar specialist had always commanded respect, but his increasingly vocal opposition to tactical decisions created ripples throughout the chain of command. His concerns centered primarily on what he perceived as unnecessary risks taken during their recent engagement with German forces, particularly the aggressive pursuit of the enemy vessel into contested waters. The situation deteriorated when Hank began documenting his objections in official reports, highlighting what he considered to be violations of standard operating procedures. These actions caught the attention of not just the immediate command structure, but also higher-ranking officers who received copies of these reports through proper channels. The question lingering in everyone's mind was whether Hank's actions stemmed from genuine concern for the crew's safety, or if personal ambitions drove his behavior. Several crew members who had previously supported Hank's perspective started distancing themselves, recognizing the potentially destructive nature of his campaign. The submarine's tight-knit community, essential for underwater operations, showed signs of fracturing. Small groups formed during mealtimes, conversations became guarded, and the once open exchange of ideas during tactical planning sessions grew stilted and formal. Lieutenant Commander Richards faced a complex challenge in addressing the situation. While he valued the diverse perspectives of his crew members, the growing discord threatened the submarine's operational effectiveness. How could he maintain crew cohesion while addressing legitimate concerns? The balance between encouraging open dialogue and maintaining military discipline became increasingly difficult to navigate. The breaking point arrived during a routine patrol mission. When orders came to investigate a suspected enemy presence in nearby waters, Hank openly questioned the intelligence reliability in front of the entire control room crew. This unprecedented breach of protocol forced Richards to take immediate action, but the damage to crew morale had already spread beyond containment. The incident sparked a formal investigation into Hank's conduct, revealing a pattern of behavior that extended beyond professional concern. Personal logs and communications showed he had been building a case against the command structure for months, carefully documenting every decision he disagreed with and sharing his findings with select individuals outside the immediate chain of command. This revelation sent shockwaves through the crew. Those who had supported Hank's initial concerns now questioned their own judgment. Had they been unwitting participants in a calculated campaign to undermine leadership? The trust that formed the foundation of their submarine's effectiveness appeared irreparably damaged. The investigation's findings led to difficult decisions regarding Hank's future aboard the Swordfish. His technical skills remained valuable, but his actions had compromised the crew's unity and operational security. The question of whether to transfer him to another assignment or pursue more severe disciplinary action weighed heavily on the command structure. Throughout this period, the submarine's mission requirements didn't diminish. The crew had to maintain their vigilance and effectiveness while dealing with this internal crisis. Enemy vessels didn't cease their activities because of internal discord, and the waters remained as dangerous as ever. How could the crew focus on external threats while managing this internal conflict? The resolution of this crisis would test the resilience of both the command structure and the crew's professional relationships. Beyond the immediate disciplinary actions, rebuilding trust and restoring unit cohesion presented a far more challenging task. Could the crew overcome this breach of trust? Or would the effects of Hank's actions continue to reverberate through future operations? The incident served as a stark reminder of how quickly internal dissent could escalate within the confined spaces of a submarine. The balance between maintaining discipline and allowing healthy discourse became a central topic of discussion throughout the naval community. What lessons could be learned from this situation to prevent similar incidents on other vessels? The aftermath of Hank's actions would influence crew dynamics and operational procedures for months to come. The challenge of rebuilding trust while maintaining operational effectiveness loomed large, raising questions about how submarine crews could better handle internal conflicts without compromising their mission objectives. The aftermath of betrayal often manifests in physical wounds as much as emotional ones. For the survivors fleeing through the harsh terrain, each step became a testament to human endurance, complicated by injuries that threatened their continued survival. How long could they maintain their pace while their bodies fought against them? The injuries sustained during their escape varied in severity. Marcus dealt with a deep gash across his left thigh, the makeshift bandage already soaked through with blood. Sarah nursed 3 broken ribs, each breath a sharp reminder of their desperate flight from the compound. Elena's sprained ankle had swollen to twice its normal size, forcing her to lean heavily on David as they pressed forward. These wounds, while significant, paled in comparison to Michael's condition. A bullet wound in his shoulder that required immediate attention. Medical supplies remained scarce, with only a basic first aid kit salvaged during their hasty departure. The group rationed antiseptic wipes and bandages, knowing that infection posed as great a threat as their pursuers. They utilized natural alternatives when possible: yarrow leaves to help clot blood, willow bark to manage pain, and stripped cloth from their own clothing for additional bandages. The terrain showed no mercy to their injured state. Rocky inclines forced them to find creative paths, often extending their journey but necessary to accommodate their limitations. What would typically take hours now stretched into days. The group developed a rotation system supporting those who struggled most while allowing others to rest when possible. This method, while slower, prevented any single person from becoming completely exhausted. Navigation presented another challenge entirely. Traditional routes had to be abandoned in favor of paths that offered cover and rest points. The group sought areas with natural concealment, dense forest sections, rocky overhangs, and dried riverbeds. These locations provided temporary sanctuary, but required careful planning to ensure they didn't become trapped. The pursuit remained relentless. Helicopter sounds periodically broke the silence, forcing the group to seek immediate cover regardless of their physical state. Ground teams left signs of their presence: broken branches, boot prints, and occasional drone buzzing overhead. How long until their hunters finally caught up? Water management became crucial for injury recovery. The group needed to stay hydrated to promote healing, but water sources exposed them to potential detection. They developed a system of collecting water during the darkest hours, using natural filtration methods with layers of cloth and charcoal from their fires. Each member carried a single container, carefully rationing their supply between water points. The psychological impact of managing injuries while evading capture created its own challenges. The constant pain served as a reminder of their vulnerability, while the need to maintain silence meant suffering had to be endured quietly. The group learned to read each other's nonverbal cues, developing a silent language of gestures and expressions to communicate distress or needed assistance. Sleep deprivation complicated their situation further. The injured required rest to heal, but prolonged stops increased their risk of capture. The solution emerged in micro-rest periods, 20-minute rotations where 2 people could sleep while others maintained watch. This method proved less than ideal but necessary for survival. Temperature fluctuations posed additional challenges for the wounded. Night brought dangerous drops in body temperature, while daylight hours risked dehydration and overexertion. The group adapted by traveling during moderate temperature periods and using their limited resources to create insulation during rest periods. Body heat became a crucial resource, with the group often huddling together during cold nights despite the discomfort it caused their injuries. Their medical knowledge expanded through necessity. They learned to identify signs of infection, how to properly clean wounds with limited supplies, and when to prioritize rest over movement. The group's survival increasingly depended on their ability to balance injury management with the constant need to evade capture. Could they maintain this delicate equilibrium long enough to reach safety? Food became both medicine and sustenance. The group sought out plants with known healing properties, learning to identify safe options through careful observation and shared knowledge. They discovered that certain berries helped reduce inflammation, while specific tree barks contained natural pain-relieving properties. This foraging served dual purposes, providing necessary nutrition while helping manage their injuries. The experience forged a deeper connection among the survivors. Physical vulnerability created a dependency that transcended their previous relationships. Each person's survival now directly linked to the group's ability to function as a unified entity. They developed an unspoken understanding. No one would be left behind, regardless of how their injuries might slow their progress. The tumultuous relationship between humans and natural forces has always been a precarious balance, but never more so than when survival hangs by a thread. How does one navigate the raw power of rushing water when every decision could mean the difference between life and death? The river's character had transformed dramatically since the group's initial crossing. Spring runoff from the mountains had swollen the waterway, turning what was once a manageable crossing into a formidable obstacle. The water level had risen significantly, creating dangerous eddies and hydraulics that could trap even experienced swimmers. The increased flow rate generated a deafening roar that made communication nearly impossible, forcing the group to rely on hand signals and pre-established protocols. Debris carried by the surging waters presented an additional layer of hazard. Fallen trees, branches, and other materials swept downstream at alarming speeds, creating potential projectiles that could cause serious injury. The riverbanks, saturated by the rising waters, had become unstable and treacherous, limiting viable crossing points and forcing careful consideration of each step. Water temperature posed another significant challenge. The spring melt had introduced near-freezing water into the river system, creating conditions where hypothermia could set in within minutes of exposure. The human body's natural response to cold water immersion, gasping for air and hyperventilation, could prove fatal in fast-moving water, making it essential to maintain control over these involuntary reactions. The physics of moving water demanded respect and understanding. Areas that appeared calm on the surface often concealed powerful undertows, while seemingly dangerous rapids sometimes offered the safest passage due to their predictable patterns. The group needed to read these signs correctly, as misinterpreting the river's behavior could lead to catastrophic consequences. Equipment limitations further complicated the situation. Standard river crossing gear had been left behind to maintain mobility, leaving the group to improvise with available materials. How does one safely transport crucial supplies across rushing water without proper waterproofing? What techniques could be employed to ensure group members remained connected without creating dangerous entanglement risks? The psychological impact of facing such conditions couldn't be underestimated. The constant roar of the water, the spray that limited visibility, and the knowledge that one mistake could prove fatal created intense mental pressure. Decision-making became more challenging under these circumstances, requiring a delicate balance between necessary caution and paralyzing fear. Time pressure added another dimension to the challenge. Lingering too long at the crossing point increased exposure risk, yet rushing decisions in such conditions could prove equally dangerous. The group needed to maintain awareness of their surroundings while executing their crossing strategy, as the river's conditions could change rapidly with upstream weather patterns. Previous river crossing experience proved both helpful and potentially misleading. While certain principles remained constant, the unique characteristics of this particular crossing required adaptation of standard techniques. What worked in normal conditions might prove ineffective or dangerous in these circumstances, demanding continuous reassessment and adjustment of strategies. The river's power served as a humbling reminder of nature's supremacy over human capability. No amount of technical skill or physical strength could completely neutralize the risks posed by such conditions. Success required a combination of respect for the natural forces at work, careful observation of changing conditions, and precise execution of chosen strategies. The challenge extended beyond the immediate crossing. The effects of cold water exposure, physical exertion, and mental stress would impact the group's capabilities long after reaching the opposite bank. How would these factors influence their ability to continue their journey? What measures could be taken to mitigate these longer-term consequences? Survival situations often present a cruel irony. The very elements needed for life, in this case water, can become the most significant threats to survival. The river represented both an obstacle and a reminder of human vulnerability in the face of natural forces. Could the group find a way to work with, rather than against, these powerful natural elements? The experience highlighted the importance of maintaining adaptability in survival situations. Pre-planned routes and strategies often require significant modification when confronted with nature's reality. The ability to read conditions accurately, adjust plans accordingly, and maintain group cohesion under stress would prove crucial for successful navigation of this challenge. The tranquil facade of the riverside terrain masked a meticulously orchestrated plan that had been set in motion long before the first ripples of conflict disturbed the water's surface. Reinhardt, displaying tactical acumen honed through years of military service, had transformed the natural landscape into an intricate web of strategic positions. What appeared as random debris and fallen logs along the riverbank were, in fact, carefully positioned markers designating firing lanes and escape routes. The first indication of the trap's existence came from subtle signs that only trained eyes would notice. Small metal clasps, painted to match the surrounding vegetation, glinted occasionally when caught by stray beams of sunlight. These devices, connected to nearly invisible tripwires, formed an interconnected network that would alert Reinhardt's forces to any movement within their designated zone of control. Who could have anticipated that such ordinary elements of the wilderness could be repurposed into sophisticated surveillance equipment? Reinhardt's men occupied elevated positions among the rocky outcrops, their presence concealed by natural formations and strategic placement of camouflage materials. Each soldier maintained line of sight with at least two others, creating an overlapping field of coverage that eliminated blind spots. The positioning allowed for crossfire scenarios while maintaining the element of surprise, a tactical advantage that could prove decisive in the coming confrontation. Communication systems had been established using a combination of hand signals and low-frequency radio transmitters, enabling silent coordination between different units. The frequencies were carefully chosen to avoid detection by standard scanning equipment, demonstrating Reinhardt's thorough understanding of modern military technology. These communication channels formed the nervous system of the trap, allowing for rapid response to any developing situation. The terrain itself played a crucial role in Reinhardt's strategy. Natural choke points created by rock formations and dense vegetation were reinforced with hidden obstacles, forcing any approaching forces into predetermined paths. These routes led to areas where Reinhardt's forces held superior firing positions and tactical advantages. How many military commanders would have recognized the potential of this seemingly unremarkable stretch of wilderness? Supply caches had been strategically placed throughout the area, containing ammunition, medical supplies, and emergency rations. These resources were protected by weatherproof containers and camouflaged to blend seamlessly with the surrounding environment. The placement of these caches ensured that Reinhardt's forces could maintain their positions for extended periods without requiring external resupply. The psychological aspect of the trap was equally well considered. The layout was designed to create a sense of isolation and vulnerability in any opposing force that entered the area. Natural acoustics were utilized to amplify certain sounds while dampening others, creating an unsettling atmosphere that could affect the judgment and decision-making capabilities of untrained personnel. Evacuation routes were established with the same attention to detail as the offensive positions. Each team member had memorized multiple escape paths, allowing for tactical withdrawal under various scenarios. These routes were marked using a system of natural indicators that would be meaningless to outside observers but crystal clear to Reinhardt's trained operatives. The integration of modern technology with traditional tactical principles demonstrated Reinhardt's adaptability. Motion sensors, disguised as natural debris, supplemented the physical tripwire system. These devices transmitted data to encrypted receivers, providing real-time intelligence about movement patterns within the target area. What other technological surprises might be concealed within this seemingly primitive setting? The trap's design incorporated contingency plans for various scenarios, including adverse weather conditions and equipment failures. Alternative positions and backup systems ensured that the effectiveness of the ambush would not be compromised by unexpected developments. This level of preparation reflected Reinhardt's experience in handling complex military operations under challenging conditions. The timing mechanism of the trap relied on both human judgment and automated systems. Preset triggers would activate under specific conditions, while trained operators maintained the ability to override these systems based on tactical assessments. This combination of automatic and manual control provided flexibility while maintaining operational security. As the trap lay primed and waiting, its true sophistication remained hidden beneath a veneer of natural chaos. The question lingering in the air was not if the trap would be sprung, but rather, when would the carefully orchestrated pieces of this military puzzle finally come together? The answer would soon emerge from the deceptive tranquility of the riverside terrain. The sudden revelation of Reinhardt's trap forced an immediate paradigm shift among the squad members. What had begun as a routine operation transformed into a desperate fight for survival, testing not only their combat skills, but the very bonds that held them together as a unit. How would they overcome an enemy who had anticipated their every move? The first moments of chaos brought an instinctive response from each squad member, their training kicking in despite the overwhelming situation. Marcus took point, his years of experience guiding him to establish a defensive position behind a partially collapsed wall. Sarah immediately began assessing their ammunition supplies, while Rodriguez focused on maintaining their communication equipment, trying to pierce through the enemy's jamming signals. Their adversary had planned meticulously, cutting off traditional escape routes and forcing them to work in closer proximity than usual. This compression of space, while tactically disadvantageous, sparked an unprecedented level of coordination among the team. Each member began anticipating their companion's needs without verbal communication, passing ammunition, covering blind spots, and supporting one another's movements with an efficiency that spoke of their shared experiences and trust. The squad's diversity in skills and specializations, once seen as merely complementary, proved crucial to their survival. Chen's expertise in electronic warfare allowed him to detect patterns in the enemy's communication frequencies, while Thompson's knowledge of urban combat helped identify potential weak points in Reinhardt's carefully constructed trap. How could they turn these individual strengths into a cohesive strategy? As the pressure mounted, the team discovered new dimensions to their working relationship. Previous disagreements and personal conflicts dissolved in the face of their shared predicament. The squad's focus shifted from individual achievement to collective survival, creating an unspoken understanding that transcended their usual military hierarchy. The challenge of limited resources forced innovative solutions. Standard operating procedures gave way to improvised tactics, with each team member contributing ideas born from their unique perspectives and experiences. This adaptive approach revealed capabilities within the squad that had remained dormant during more conventional operations. Their opponents' expectations of how a military unit typically operates became a weakness to exploit. The squad's ability to break from traditional patterns and embrace unconventional methods confused and frustrated Reinhardt's carefully laid plans. What started as a desperate bid for survival evolved into a strategic advantage, as the team's unpredictability made them harder to target and contain. The physical demands of their situation tested not only their endurance, but their trust in one another. Moments arose where individual survival depended entirely on the actions of teammates, reinforcing the reality that their fates were inextricably linked. This interdependence fostered a deeper level of cooperation than any training exercise had ever achieved. Communication evolved beyond standard military protocols, with the squad developing their own shorthand signals and cues. These adaptations allowed them to coordinate complex maneuvers while maintaining operational security, demonstrating how shared danger can accelerate the development of team dynamics. The pressure of their circumstances revealed leadership qualities in unexpected places. Junior members of the squad stepped forward with crucial insights, while experienced veterans showed willingness to adopt new approaches suggested by their colleagues. This fluid exchange of roles and responsibilities strengthened their collective capability. Time became both an enemy and an ally. While each passing moment increased the physical and mental strain on the squad, It also refined their coordination and mutual understanding. The team's efficiency improved as they learned to anticipate and complement each other's actions, turning their small unit into a more formidable force than the sum of its parts. The experience transformed their understanding of unit cohesion. Beyond the standard military definition, they discovered that true strength lay in their ability to adapt and support one another unconditionally. This realization brought a shift in how they approached both their current crisis and their role as a military unit. As the situation continued to evolve, the squad's response demonstrated the profound difference between trained cooperation and genuine brotherhood in arms. Their survival increasingly depended not just on their military skills, but on their growing ability to function as a single, coordinated entity. Would this newfound unity be enough to overcome the challenges that still lay ahead? The crucible of combat forged stronger bonds between the squad members, but it also raised questions about the nature of military camaraderie. How would these strengthened relationships affect their future operations? What lasting impact would this experience have on their understanding of teamwork and unit cohesion? The ancient stone bridge spanning the ravine represented more than just a tactical obstacle for the squad. It marked a critical juncture where their training, trust, and teamwork would be tested to their limits. Intelligence reports had confirmed the enemy's extensive preparation of the crossing, transforming the historic structure into a deadly trap designed to halt any advance. As the squad approached under the cover of early morning mist, Staff Sergeant Rodriguez conducted a methodical assessment through his binoculars. The bridge's weathered surface bore subtle signs of tampering, displaced stones, unusual wire patterns, and strategic weak points that suggested a complex network of explosives. How would they overcome such a carefully orchestrated defensive position? The enemy had demonstrated considerable expertise in their preparation, incorporating multiple trigger mechanisms and redundant detonation systems. Primary charges were likely positioned at key structural points, while secondary devices targeted potential bypass routes and alternative crossing attempts. This level of sophistication indicated the presence of specialized combat engineers, raising the stakes significantly for any attempted crossing. Technical Sergeant Chen's expertise in explosive ordnance disposal became invaluable as he analyzed the bridge's defensive setup. His trained eye identified pressure plates concealed beneath loose stones, tripwires disguised among natural debris, and motion sensors positioned to detect movement across the span. The complexity of the system suggested the enemy anticipated various crossing strategies and had prepared countermeasures for each. The squad faced a critical decision: attempt to disarm the extensive trap network or seek an alternative route. Each option carried significant risks. Disarming the devices would require precise coordination and expose team members to potential detection, while seeking another crossing point would consume valuable time and resources. What factors would determine their ultimate course of action? Rodriguez initiated a detailed planning session, drawing upon each squad member's specialized knowledge. Private First Class Torres's background in structural engineering provided crucial insights into the bridge's vulnerable points and potential safe passages. Corporal Williams's expertise in enemy tactics helped anticipate likely observation points and defensive positions covering the bridge. The team developed a multi-phase approach that would test the limits of their collective capabilities. The first stage involved creating a diversion to draw attention from potential enemy observers, allowing Chen to begin his careful assessment of the primary explosive devices. Meanwhile, other squad members would establish security positions and prepare equipment for rapid deployment. Weather conditions added another layer of complexity to the operation. The morning mist provided essential concealment, but also limited visibility for security elements. The damp conditions affected the reliability of electronic detection equipment, forcing Chen to rely more heavily on visual inspection and manual techniques. How would these environmental factors influence the success of their mission? The squad's previous experiences working together proved invaluable during the operation. Each member anticipated their teammates' needs, maintaining precise communication while minimizing unnecessary radio traffic. Their shared understanding of hand signals and standard operating procedures allowed for fluid coordination despite the high-pressure situation. As Chen began his methodical approach to the first detected device, the rest of the squad maintained absolute focus on their assigned sectors. The sound of distant gunfire served as a reminder of the broader conflict surrounding their position, but the team remained committed to their immediate objective. The success of future operations hinged on securing this crossing point. The process of clearing the bridge required a delicate balance between speed and caution. Each disarmed device provided new information about the enemy's methodology, allowing Chen to work more efficiently while maintaining necessary safety protocols. The team's security elements remained vigilant, knowing that the enemy might have planned for such a clearance attempt. The operation revealed the enemy's sophisticated understanding of defensive preparations. Multiple redundant systems suggested professional military training, while the placement of devices demonstrated intimate knowledge of demolition techniques. What did this level of expertise indicate about the opposition they faced? The squad's progress across the bridge marked a significant achievement in their mission, but it also raised important questions about the enemy's capabilities and intentions. The extensive preparation of this crossing point suggested its strategic importance extended beyond immediate tactical considerations. Understanding these broader implications would prove crucial for future operations. As the final devices were cleared and the bridge secured, the squad had demonstrated the effectiveness of their combined arms approach. Each member's specialized skills contributed to the successful outcome, reinforcing the importance of diverse capabilities within small unit operations. Their experience at the Devil's Bridge would serve as a valuable reference for handling similar challenges in future missions. The tactical situation at the Devil's Bridge deteriorated rapidly as enemy forces converged from multiple directions. The squad found themselves caught in an increasingly precarious position, with their limited ammunition reserves dwindling and the structural integrity of their defensive position compromised by sustained enemy fire. How long could they maintain their foothold without reinforcements? Lieutenant Sarah Chen assessed their options while providing covering fire from behind a partially collapsed concrete barrier. The bridge's support structure had been severely damaged during the initial confrontation, and engineering analysis from their combat systems indicated the entire span could fail within minutes. Beyond the immediate threat of collapse, hostile forces had begun setting up heavy weapons on the far bank, which would soon render their position completely untenable. Specialist Marcus Rodriguez monitored their tactical display, noting the steady approach of enemy units attempting to flank their position from both riverbanks. The squad's automated defense systems had already been depleted, and their remaining ammunition would not sustain them through another concentrated assault. Their mission parameters required holding this crossing point to prevent enemy forces from outflanking the main defensive line, but the cost of maintaining this position was becoming catastrophically high. The squad's AI tactical advisor calculated their survival probability at less than 20% if they maintained their current position. However, abandoning the bridge would create a critical vulnerability in the defensive network, potentially compromising the entire sector. The weight of this strategic reality bore heavily on Lieutenant Chen as she evaluated their rapidly diminishing options. Corporal Zhang's voice cut through the tactical chatter, presenting an alternative that no one had voiced but many had considered. The demolitions expert had been studying the bridge's structural weak points since they'd arrived, and his analysis suggested a controlled collapse could deny the enemy this crossing point while allowing most of the squad to withdraw to secondary positions. The unspoken element of his proposal hung in the air. Someone would need to remain behind to ensure proper detonation timing. The implications of Zhang's suggestion rippled through the squad's neural network. Their shared combat interface allowed each member to instantly grasp the tactical validity of his plan, while simultaneously processing its human cost. Who among them would volunteer for what would almost certainly be a terminal mission? Before Chen could formulate a response, Zhang had already begun uploading his demolitions calculations to the squad's tactical network. His expertise in structural engineering made him the obvious choice for executing this plan, though no one wanted to acknowledge this fact. The lieutenant found herself caught between her duty as a commander and her responsibility to protect her personnel. The decision matrix shifted dramatically as enemy fire intensified, and their perimeter sensors detected additional hostile forces approaching with heavy assault equipment. The window for executing a controlled demolition would close within minutes, after which the bridge would likely fall in a manner that could leave it partially usable by enemy forces. Zhang's movements were deliberate, as he began positioning his remaining explosive charges at key structural points. His actions reflected years of training and experience, each placement calculated to achieve maximum effect with minimal ordnance. The rest of the squad provided covering fire, their efforts now focused on buying time for his work, rather than holding the position indefinitely. Lieutenant Chen authorized the withdrawal plan while maintaining tactical command of the operation. The squad would execute a fighting retreat in stages, maintaining suppressing fire to protect Zhang as he completed the demolition setup. Their combat systems synchronized automatically, coordinating their movements to maximize coverage while minimizing exposure. The tactical situation grew more complex as enemy forces recognized the squad's withdrawal and increased their pressure. Several hostile units attempted to rush the bridge, forcing the squad to expend precious ammunition in defense. Zhang worked methodically despite the chaos, his movements economical and precise as he completed the final preparations. Through their neural interface, the squad shared a moment of silent acknowledgement with Zhang. No words were necessary as his calm acceptance flowed through their tactical network. His vital signs showed elevated but controlled stress levels, indicating a professional focused on his task rather than his fate. The withdrawal executed precisely as planned, with each squad member moving to their designated fallback positions, while maintaining interlocking fields of fire. Zhang remained at his post, monitoring the bridge's structural sensors and waiting for the optimal moment to trigger the charges. The enemy's final push would provide the perfect opportunity, as their weight on the compromised structure would maximize the demolition's effectiveness. As the last squad member cleared the minimum safe distance, Zhang transmitted a final data packet containing updated structural analysis and demolitions calculations. This information would prove valuable for future operations, though none wanted to dwell on the circumstances of its acquisition. How many other bridges would need to be denied to the enemy? How many more sacrifices would this war demand? The bridge's destruction, when it came, was precisely calculated and expertly executed. Zhang's charges detonated in a carefully orchestrated sequence, bringing down the structure in a way that would make recovery or bypass operations extremely difficult for enemy forces. The tactical objective was achieved, though the cost would weigh heavily on the squad's collective conscience. The French resistance network operated as a complex web of safe houses, informants, and guerrilla fighters. During World War II, and for Allied soldiers caught behind enemy lines, these brave civilians represented their best hope for survival. As dawn broke over the French countryside in the summer of 1944, this underground network prepared to shelter yet another group of desperate soldiers seeking refuge. The local resistance cell, led by a former schoolteacher codenamed Reinhardt, had developed sophisticated methods for screening potential allies and identifying German infiltrators. Their vetting process involved a series of seemingly innocent questions about American culture and military protocol, designed to trip up any imposters attempting to penetrate their ranks. How many genuine Allied soldiers had passed through these checkpoints carrying vital intelligence and hope for the liberation of France? The resistance fighters maintained an intricate system of lookouts positioned throughout the surrounding villages, using everything from laundry line configurations to specific arrangements of flower pots to signal German patrol movements. These simple yet effective communication methods allowed them to move soldiers between safe houses while avoiding detection. Their network extended through farmhouses, shops, and even local churches, with each location carefully chosen for its strategic value and the reliability of its occupants. Medical supplies proved particularly challenging to procure under German occupation. But the resistance had developed connections with sympathetic French doctors and pharmacists. These medical professionals risked their lives to treat wounded Allied soldiers, often performing complex procedures in makeshift conditions with limited resources. Their dedication to preserving life, regardless of nationality, demonstrated the profound humanity that persisted even in warfare's darkest moments. The resistance cell's food supply chain operated through an elaborate system of local farmers and merchants, who contributed portions of their produce and goods, despite facing severe rationing themselves. These provisions had to be carefully distributed to avoid arousing suspicion from German authorities, who monitored unusual patterns in food acquisition. How did these ordinary citizens find the courage to share their meager resources with strangers, knowing discovery meant certain death? Communication between resistance cells relied on a network of couriers, often young women who could move more freely through German checkpoints. These messengers memorized complex codes and radio frequencies, carrying nothing that could incriminate them if captured. Their role proved crucial in coordinating rescue operations and sharing intelligence about German troop movements with Allied command. The resistance maintained strict protocols for managing their safe houses, never allowing soldiers to stay in one location for more than 48 hours. This constant movement reduced the risk of discovery and distributed the burden of shelter among multiple supporters. Each transfer required precise timing and coordination, with backup plans prepared for every conceivable complication. Language. Barriers presented another challenge, as many Allied soldiers spoke no French and few resistance members knew English. The groups developed a basic sign language supplemented with crude drawings and maps, allowing them to communicate essential information about routes, dangers, and timetables. This improvised communication system, while limited, proved remarkably effective in coordinating complex operations. The psychological toll on resistance members remained immense, as they lived in constant fear of discovery while maintaining normal daily routines. They developed techniques for managing stress and maintaining operational security, including compartmentalization of information and regular changes in meeting locations and times. What invisible scars did these brave civilians carry from their years of living double lives? Children often played crucial roles in the resistance network, serving as lookouts and messengers. Their innocent appearances made them less likely to draw suspicion, and they could move through towns with relative freedom. The resistance took great care to protect these young participants while utilizing their unique advantages in gathering intelligence and delivering messages. The support network extended beyond active resistance members to include sympathetic civilians who provided small but essential services. A baker who left extra bread by the back door, a seamstress who mended uniforms without asking questions, or a farmer who allowed his barn to be used as a temporary shelter. These silent supporters formed the backbone of the resistance's ability to sustain its operations. Training new resistance members required patience and caution, as each addition to the network represented both an asset and a potential vulnerability. Veterans of the movement developed careful methods for assessing character and teaching essential skills, while maintaining operational security. The process of building trust took time, but the network's survival depended on the careful selection and preparation of new members. As the war progressed, the resistance adapted its techniques and expanded its capabilities, learning from both successes and failures. They developed increasingly sophisticated methods for gathering intelligence, moving personnel, and coordinating with Allied forces. Their evolution from a loose collection of resistance groups into a coordinated network demonstrated the power of determined civilians to challenge even the most formidable military occupation. The deteriorating situation in occupied France left Louis and Hank with diminishing options as German forces methodically tightened their grip on the region. After weeks of hit-and-run operations alongside their French resistance allies, intelligence reports indicated that Wehrmacht units had begun systematic sweeps through the countryside, leaving the two Americans increasingly isolated. What drives men to make a stand when retreat remains possible? For Louis and Hank, the decision crystallized around protecting the network of French civilians who had risked everything to shelter them. The German counterintelligence teams had begun connecting. The dots between various resistance activities and several safe houses had already been compromised. If the Americans continued moving between locations, they risked exposing more of their protectors to Nazi reprisals. The pair selected their defensive position carefully, an abandoned farmhouse overlooking a crucial crossroads that German supply convoys frequently utilized. The stone structure offered excellent fields of fire, while its elevated position prevented easy approach from multiple directions. More importantly, It sat far enough from civilian populations to minimize potential collateral damage from any engagement. Luis focused on establishing multiple fighting positions throughout the building's 2 stories, stockpiling their limited ammunition at each location to enable rapid repositioning during combat. His experience as a squad leader proved invaluable as he analyzed likely enemy approaches and configured interlocking fields of fire. Meanwhile, Hank worked to improve their odds of survival by setting up improvised early warning systems and obstacles along probable attack routes. Their preparation time proved shorter than anticipated. Within 48 hours of occupying the position, their first contact with German forces occurred when a reconnaissance patrol stumbled upon one of Hank's warning triggers. The Americans' initial volley eliminated half the patrol, while the survivors withdrew to report their location. Both men knew their position was now compromised. How long could they hold out against what would surely be an overwhelming response? The German reaction came swiftly but cautiously. Rather than immediately assaulting the farmhouse, they established a loose cordon and began probing attacks to test the defenders' capabilities and positions. Luis and Hank maintained strict fire discipline, only engaging when they could ensure kills while conserving their precious ammunition. This tactical patience created uncertainty among the German forces about the actual number of defenders they faced. As the siege entered its second day, the Germans began employing mortars to soften up the position. Luis and Hank constantly shifted locations within the building, using their pre-positioned ammunition caches to maintain an effective defense while avoiding the increasingly accurate mortar fire. The stone walls provided good protection, but both men knew it was only a matter of time before the Germans brought up heavier weapons. The defenders' situation grew more precarious as their ammunition supplies dwindled. Each engagement required careful shot selection, with Luis coaching Hank on targeting priorities and fire control. Their rifle fire had to count. Every missed shot represented one less chance to hold their position. Would their remaining ammunition be enough to repel the major assault they knew was coming? That question was answered at dawn on the 3rd day. German infantry advanced under the cover of machine gun fire, while a pair of armored vehicles provided mobile support. Luis and Hank executed their prepared defense plan, engaging the infantry, while avoiding the attention of the armored threats. Their coordinated fire broke up the first 2 assault attempts, but the Germans maintained pressure while continuing to probe for weaknesses. The defenders' position became critical by mid-morning. Their ammunition had been reduced to a handful of rounds each, and the German forces had identified blind spots in their fields of fire. Luis spotted enemy troops working their way through a drainage ditch that offered covered approach to the farmhouse's rear entrance. How much longer could they maintain an effective defense? The answer came in an unexpected form. The sound of aircraft engines drew everyone's attention skyward as Allied fighter bombers appeared, responding to resistance reports of German armored movements in the area. The aircraft's strafing runs forced the German units to abandon their assault and seek cover, creating a brief window of opportunity. Luis and Hank seized their chance, executing a fighting withdrawal through their pre-planned escape route. They moved rapidly through the chaos of the air attack, breaking contact with their pursuers and disappearing into the countryside. Their defensive action had succeeded in its primary objective, protecting their resistance network by drawing German attention away from civilian areas. The cost of their stand became apparent as they made their way to their emergency rendezvous point. Both men had sustained injuries during the engagement, though none serious enough to prevent movement. More significantly, they had expended nearly all their ammunition and lost most of their equipment. How would they continue their resistance activities with such limited resources? Their immediate future remained uncertain, but their defensive action had achieved more than they realized. The German forces' focus on hunting down 2 American soldiers had provided crucial breathing room for the local resistance to reorganize and relocate compromised members. Additionally, their stand had demonstrated to their French allies that the Americans were willing to risk everything to protect their supporters, strengthening bonds that would prove vital in the coming months. The thunderous echo of helicopter rotors pierced the night as Reinhardt's relentless pursuit of Luis and Hank intensified through the dense forest terrain. The mercenary commander's determination had transformed into an obsession, driving him to push his remaining forces beyond their limits in what had become a personal vendetta. Intelligence reports from Reinhardt's forward scouts indicated that Louis and Hank had split up, employing classic guerrilla tactics to divide their pursuers' attention. This development forced Reinhardt to make a critical decision: maintain his full force as a unified front or divide his teams to cover more ground. The choice would prove pivotal in the unfolding chase, as every minute allowed the fugitives to potentially slip further from his grasp. Reinhardt opted to split his forces into 3 specialized units. The first, equipped with thermal imaging equipment, would track Louis's heat signature through the undergrowth. The second unit deployed tracking dogs to follow Hank's scent trail. The third team remained in reserve, ready to converge on either target once located. This strategic division of resources demonstrated Reinhardt's tactical expertise, but it also revealed his growing desperation to conclude the operation. The pursuit took an unexpected turn when Louis's trail led toward a series of abandoned mining tunnels. These forgotten passages, remnants of the region's industrial past, offered both sanctuary and danger. The narrow confines would neutralize Reinhardt's numerical advantage, but they also presented a potential dead end that could trap Louis permanently. The mercenary commander recognized this tactical dilemma, knowing that rushing in blindly could prove catastrophic. Meanwhile, Hank's path veered toward higher ground, suggesting he aimed to reach a position where he could potentially signal for external help. This realization spurred Reinhardt to redirect additional resources to intercept him, understanding that outside intervention would completely derail his operation. The helicopter's searchlight swept across the canopy, creating a deadly game of light and shadow as Hank utilized his military training to evade detection. The chase's dynamics shifted when Reinhardt's communications team intercepted fragments of radio chatter, suggesting that Louis and Hank's separation was not random, but part of a coordinated strategy. This revelation forced the mercenary commander to reevaluate his approach, considering the possibility that he was being led into an elaborate trap. What appeared to be a straightforward pursuit had evolved into a complex tactical engagement where psychological warfare played an equally important role as physical tracking. Weather conditions began to deteriorate, adding another layer of complexity to the operation. The approaching storm system threatened to wash away tracks and interfere with thermal imaging equipment. Reinhardt knew the environmental changes would favor his targets, who could use the adverse conditions to mask their movements. Time was becoming an increasingly critical factor, with each passing moment diminishing the likelihood of a successful capture. The pursuit's intensity reached new heights when one of Reinhardt's teams reported signs of recent combat. Shell casings and disturbed vegetation indicated a brief but fierce firefight, suggesting that either Louis or Hank had encountered and engaged with local security forces. This development introduced an unwelcome variable into Reinhardt's calculations, as civilian law enforcement involvement would significantly complicate his mission parameters. The mercenary commander's frustration mounted as reports confirmed that his quarry had managed to acquire additional supplies and possibly weapons from abandoned outposts along their escape route. This demonstrated a level of resourcefulness that Reinhardt had underestimated, forcing him to accept that his targets were not merely fleeing but actively preparing for a potential confrontation. As the chase entered its critical phase, Reinhardt received intelligence that would fundamentally alter the pursuit's nature. Satellite imagery revealed that Louis and Hank's apparent separation was leading both teams toward a central point, a location that held strategic significance known only to them. This convergence pattern suggested a predetermined rendezvous point, possibly where they had arranged for extraction or prepared a defensive position. The realization that his targets were executing a carefully planned strategy rather than making desperate escape attempts forced Reinhardt to confront an uncomfortable truth. He had potentially been outmaneuvered from the start. The chase had transformed from a simple pursuit into a complex military operation where the hunters might well become the hunted. What began as a straightforward mission to eliminate 2 troublesome witnesses had evolved into a sophisticated game of tactical warfare, with both sides demonstrating levels of strategic thinking that elevated the conflict beyond a mere chase. What would happen when these carefully laid plans finally collided? The answer lay in the approaching storm, the darkening night, and the inevitable confrontation that would determine not just the fate of Luis and Hank, but the ultimate outcome of Reinhardt's entire operation. The final moves in this deadly game were about to unfold, with each participant knowing that the slightest miscalculation could prove fatal. The patrol boat's engine roared through the night as waves crashed against its hull, creating a symphony of mechanical and natural forces. Reinhardt stood at the helm, his weathered hands gripping the controls with calculated pressure, while his eyes remained fixed on the vessel ahead. The distance between the two boats had narrowed to mere hundreds of meters, and the inevitability of confrontation hung heavy in the salt-laden air. The pursuit had stretched the patrol boat's capabilities to their limits, pushing the aging vessel through conditions that would have given pause to more cautious operators. The mechanical strain manifested in subtle vibrations through the deck plates, yet these tremors did nothing to shake Reinhardt's resolve. His quarry had proven remarkably resourceful, but the hunter knew the advantages had finally shifted in his favor. Radio chatter crackled through the boat's communication system as coastal authorities attempted to establish contact with both vessels. Their calls went unanswered, for Reinhardt had disabled the radio shortly after beginning his pursuit. He had no intention of allowing bureaucratic interference to derail his mission, not when he had come this far. What would the authorities understand of his purpose, of the years of preparation that had led to this moment? The gap between the vessels continued to close. Reinhardt could now make out individual figures moving on the deck ahead, their movements suggesting mounting desperation. The fugitives had exhausted their options for escape, and the realization of their predicament was becoming apparent in their behavior. Would they attempt to negotiate, or would they choose resistance? The first shots came without warning, cutting through the darkness like angry hornets. Bullets sparked off the patrol boat's superstructure, forcing Reinhardt to duck behind the relative safety of the helm console. The attack confirmed what he had suspected. His targets would not surrender without a fight. The challenge would be to subdue them without destroying critical evidence or losing the primary target. Reinhardt's response was measured and precise. He adjusted the patrol boat's course to present a smaller profile while maintaining pursuit. His hand moved to the weapon secured at his side, but he refrained from returning fire immediately. Patience had served him well throughout his career, and it would serve him now. Let them expend their ammunition in desperate, ineffective attacks. The chase had entered its final phase, transforming from a test of speed and seamanship into a deadly game of close-quarters combat. The two vessels drew inexorably closer, their wakes intermingling in the churning water. The sound of gunfire became more frequent, punctuated by the metallic ping of rounds finding their marks on both boats. A particularly well-aimed shot shattered the patrol boat's windscreen, sending fragments of safety glass cascading across the helm station. Reinhardt remained unmoved, protected by his position behind the console. The attack had revealed the location of at least one shooter, and he noted the position for future reference. How many opponents remained active on the other vessel? The patrol boat's superior size and construction began to tell as it closed the final distance. Its bow wave now buffeted the smaller craft, causing it to pitch and roll unpredictably. The effect degraded the accuracy of the fugitives' fire, creating opportunities that Reinhardt had been waiting for. He began to implement the next phase of his strategy, maneuvering to force the other vessel into a position from which it could not escape. Water sprayed across the deck as both boats maneuvered in an increasingly tight pattern. The combat had evolved into a maritime version of a knife fight, with each vessel seeking advantage through position and timing. Reinhardt's experience in maritime operations proved invaluable as he anticipated and countered each attempt by his opponents to break free from his containment strategy. The culmination of the chase approached with the inevitability of an incoming tide. Reinhardt had positioned his vessel to leave the fugitives with only two options: surrender or attempt a desperate boarding action. Which would they choose? The answer would determine the nature of the final confrontation, but not its outcome. Reinhardt had prepared for either scenario, and his preparation would prove decisive. Ammunition continued to be exchanged between the vessels, but with decreasing frequency as the fugitives realized the futility of their position. The patrol boat's bulk now loomed over their smaller craft, its presence an inescapable reminder of their diminishing options. The moment of decision had arrived, and with it, the opportunity for Reinhardt to complete his mission. The sound of combat began to merge with the natural rhythm of the sea, creating an atmosphere of suspended animation as both sides assessed their positions. What thoughts occupied the minds of the fugitives as they contemplated their remaining choices? Did they understand the full scope of their situation, or were they still clinging to hope of escape? The Mediterranean's vast expanse stretched before the patrol boat as it pushed steadily northward through the early morning hours. The vessel, bearing its cargo of exhausted survivors, had maintained its course through the night, following the violent confrontation that had left several dead and the remaining passengers shaken to their core. How many more obstacles would they face before reaching safety? The navigation equipment, though basic, provided enough guidance to maintain their bearing toward Allied territory. Lieutenant Hassan worked methodically at the helm, his military training evident in the precise way he handled the vessel. Despite his injuries from the previous night's struggle, the consistent drone of the engines provided an oddly comforting backdrop to the tense atmosphere on board. Sarah Miller, the American journalist, documented everything in her worn notebook, her hands still trembling slightly as she recorded the events that had transpired. Her role had shifted from mere observer to active participant in this harrowing journey, and the weight of that transformation showed in her careful attention to detail. What would the world make of these accounts once they reached safety? The remaining refugees huddled in small groups throughout the boat, their conversations hushed but persistent. Among them, Malik and his sister Amira tended to those who had sustained injuries during the fight. Their medical supplies were limited, but they worked efficiently with what they had, using torn pieces of clothing as makeshift bandages and rationing the remaining clean water for the wounded. Radio communications had become increasingly crucial as they approached Allied waters. Hassan maintained regular checks of the frequencies, listening for any signs of friendly vessels or coastal authorities. The static-filled airwaves occasionally carried fragments of transmissions in English and French, growing clearer with each passing hour. These distant voices served as beacons of hope, drawing them closer to their destination. The morning sun revealed the toll the journey had taken on the vessel itself. Bullet holes peppered the hull, and dried blood stained various surfaces despite attempts to clean it away. Yet the boat pressed forward, its engines maintaining a steady rhythm that belied the damage it had sustained. Would it hold together long enough to deliver its passengers to safety? The Mediterranean's waters grew busier as they progressed northward, with commercial vessels appearing more frequently on the horizon. Each distant ship prompted both hope and anxiety among the passengers. Could they trust these vessels to provide assistance, or might they pose yet another threat? Hassan maintained a careful distance from other craft, unwilling to risk any confrontation that might jeopardize their progress. The group's food supplies had dwindled significantly, forcing them to implement strict rationing. The remaining provisions consisted primarily of dried goods and a few containers of fresh water. Despite their hunger, the survivors shared what little they had, understanding that their collective survival depended on mutual support. The children received priority in the distribution, their needs taking precedence over those of the adults. As the day progressed, signs of Allied presence became more apparent. Military aircraft occasionally passed overhead, their distinctive silhouettes drawing all eyes upward. Each passing plane sparked discussions about whether they had been spotted and if help might be on the way. The increased military activity suggested they were approaching controlled waters, but would they be welcomed or viewed with suspicion? The coastline they sought remained beyond the horizon, but modern navigation equipment confirmed they were on the correct course. Hassan consulted regularly with a small group of passengers who had maritime experience, pooling their knowledge to ensure they maintained the optimal route. Their collaborative effort highlighted how the group had evolved from a collection of desperate individuals into a coordinated unit focused on survival. The afternoon brought a significant development as Hassan detected more frequent radio traffic in English. The transmissions, though not directed at their vessel, indicated they had entered waters regularly patrolled by Allied forces. The change in radioactivity prompted Hassan to prepare the group for potential contact with authorities. How would they present their case to avoid being turned away? Sarah worked with Hassan to compile documentation of their journey, including evidence of the attacks they had endured and the legitimate refugee status of the passengers. Her journalistic background proved invaluable in organizing their narrative in a way that would be clear to Western authorities. The stack of papers, photographs, and identity documents represented their best hope for a sympathetic reception. The atmosphere aboard the vessel shifted subtly as signs of civilization increased. The distant shapes of large ships on the horizon and contrails of commercial aircraft overhead served as tangible reminders that they were approaching the developed world. Yet these signs of progress also raised new anxieties among the passengers. What challenges awaited them in their intended destination? How would they navigate the complex bureaucracy of refugee processing? As the sun began its descent toward the horizon, Hassan announced they had entered international waters patrolled by Allied forces. The news sparked a mixture of relief and apprehension among the passengers. Their immediate survival seemed more assured, but the next phase of their journey, seeking asylum and building new lives, loomed as an equally daunting challenge. What would freedom's shore hold for these survivors of violence and persecution? How does one measure the weight of survival? For the group who traversed the perilous journey across Nazi-occupied territory, their arrival at Allied lines marked not an end, but a beginning of a different kind of struggle. The psychological toll of their ordeal manifested in various ways as each survivor processed their experiences through their unique lens of trauma and resilience. The initial medical examinations revealed the physical costs of their journey. Malnutrition had taken its toll, with most survivors having lost significant weight. Their bodies bore the marks of their ordeal: blistered feet, frost-damaged extremities, and various injuries sustained during their escape. Yet these visible wounds represented only the surface of their experience. For many, sleep proved elusive in those first days of freedom. The constant vigilance required during their journey had rewired their nervous systems, making it difficult to accept that they were truly safe. Some reported starting at sudden noises, while others found themselves unconsciously scanning their surroundings for threats even in secure Allied facilities. The military doctors diagnosed many with what they termed combat fatigue, though the condition would later be recognized as a form of post-traumatic stress. The process of recording their testimonies brought its own challenges. Allied intelligence officers conducted detailed interviews, requiring survivors to recount their experiences for military records. While some found a degree of catharsis in sharing their stories, others struggled to verbalize the horrors they had witnessed. How could words adequately convey the feeling of hiding in frozen forests or the terror of near capture? Children who survived the journey presented unique concerns for medical personnel and social workers. Their remarkable adaptability during the escape had helped them survive, but now they faced the task of relearning how to be children in a world at peace. Many displayed behaviors that reflected their experiences: hoarding food, maintaining unusual silence, or showing extreme wariness of strangers. The challenge became helping them reconstruct a sense of security that their young lives had been denied. Survivors who had lost family members during the journey or before the escape now faced the daunting task of grieving while simultaneously adapting to their new reality. The Allied authorities worked to help them locate any surviving relatives. But for many, the search yielded only confirmation of losses they had already suspected. This process of confirmation often triggered delayed grief responses that complicated their recovery. The relationship dynamics within the group began to shift as the immediate danger passed. Bonds forged in crisis remained strong, but survivors now had to navigate their connections in a different context. Some found themselves struggling to maintain relationships that had been essential for survival, but were now reminded of trauma. Others discovered that their shared experiences created lifelong connections that transcended ordinary friendship. Questions of identity and purpose emerged as survivors began contemplating their futures. Many had left behind professions, homes, and established lives. Now they faced decisions about where to go and how to rebuild. Some chose to remain near their fellow survivors, creating small communities of shared experience. Others felt compelled to distance themselves geographically from reminders of their ordeal, seeking fresh starts in new locations. The Allied authorities faced their own challenges in providing appropriate support. While they had protocols for handling military personnel affected by combat, the unique needs of civilian survivors required different approaches. Medical professionals found themselves adapting their treatments, learning from their patients as much as they treated them. This process would later influence the development of trauma care for civilian populations. Religious and spiritual responses varied among the survivors. Some found their faith strengthened by their survival, interpreting their escape as divine intervention. Others grappled with theological questions about why they had survived while others perished. Religious leaders among the Allied forces worked to provide spiritual support, while respecting the diverse ways in which survivors processed their experiences through their belief systems. The documentation of their journey became increasingly important as survivors recognized the historical significance of their experiences. Some began keeping detailed journals, others participated in formal interviews with historians, and a few eventually wrote memoirs. This process of recording served multiple purposes: creating historical records, providing personal catharsis, and ensuring that future generations would understand the human cost of war and the triumph of human resilience. As weeks turned into months, the survivors' experiences began to shape the broader understanding of civilian trauma in wartime. Their stories contributed to evolving theories about human resilience and the long-term effects of survival under extreme conditions. What had begun as a desperate bid for freedom had become a testament to human endurance and a source of valuable insights into the psychological impact of war on civilian populations. Up next, we have two more incredible stories that are waiting for you. Just click the image you want to watch and it will take you there. If you enjoyed this video, make sure to subscribe. It would mean a lot.